We love our live in studio audience. They are the best. Welcome into another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. I'm Jay, and joining me today is Brad Baldridge. Brad, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing great.
Great to hear. Well, Brad, first off, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to have you on today and talk to you a little bit about taming the high cost of college since it's about that time of year and kids are going off to college. So I'm very excited to talk about that and also just more about you and your journey through fatherhood and being a dad as well. So a little bit about you for the listeners, in addition to the intro here. You're a financial expert, blogger, and host of Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Brad, you've been sharing your college planning insights with clients, subscribers, and listeners for nearly 20 years. You also teach parents the best ways to save and pay for college, including how to find the right school, maximize financial aid and scholarship, avoid student loan debt, and make your children's college dreams come true without wiping out your finances or retirement. That would be the parents' finances and retirement. Since 1998,
Yeah.
Brad, you've become one of the nation's leading college planning and college financial experts. You offer life-changing advice through your private practice, your online platforms, and a numerous of workshops, seminars, and events each year. So that's a little bit about you. Just scratching the surface there a little
Yes.
bit, but I would love to know more about you, your path through life, your path through fatherhood, that kind of brought you into this field and brought you to kind of where we are today as we talk.
Wow. Yeah. So, I got involved in financial advice about 5 years out of college. I actually switched careers. I have an engineering degree, and I got involved in rental real estate and then personal finance. And I did work in this area part time and then switched to full time and then kind of launched my business in about 96 or so. And got more deeply involved in college planning as a financial planning specialty about 2004 or five, and kind of took off from there. And
Okay.
then, as far as me personally, I've got kids in high school and college now, so I'm, as I say, I'm eating my own cooking, where I'm actually having to try and get my kids to do the things that I tell other parents to do, and I feel their pain now, and then how difficult it can be
Yes,
with your own children compared to other people's children.
definitely. So what's that been like? Kind of eating your own cooking. Do you like your recipes? Is it tasting all right? Just kind of play on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting, and as far as, and again, I'm not the expert at home, whereas when I'm talking with other parents and their children, I am the expert. But as far as my kids are concerned, I don't know anything, which is a very common thing that happens as kids get into their teenage years and they start to push away and try and do their own thing and become their own boss, so to speak. And it's just part of growing up. I talk about it all the time with parents that and sometimes that's one of the reasons I'm involved, is because, again, mom or dad can say it and the student doesn't take it to heart, but somebody outside the family says it, and then it's real.
That's so true. Because sometimes all it takes is just that outside perspective for a family, for a kid to hear it from someone else. Because the same message coming from mom and dad doesn't quite land the same, but when it's just changing up the setting. I talk a lot about this, and when you just shake up that setting a little bit, you shake out the people involved, and you're delivering the same message, it lands. Like, I work in mental health, I work with children and families, and so I talk about it all day long. Like, well, if it's not working at home, you're trying to deliver that message. Like, have you tried taking a car ride, going to the park, going outside, playing a game, just shaking up what you're doing and mixing it up? Sometimes that's all it takes.
Right.
So, oh, go ahead. Let's see.
I
So one of my questions here for you, Brad, is, so I'm a young father. I have my brother and I. We both have kids. We're kids range age from newborn to the oldest between us is seven. So what can we do
Mhm.
for us in our situation to start preparing for our kids to go to college now?
Right. Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think people need to realize is that college kind of happens in two phases. There's early stage planning, which, what you're describing for your own family is certainly early stage, but early stage is anything up to about middle school. Once you
Okay.
hit high school, then you switch over to what I would call late stage planning. And the big difference is in late stage planning, you really are kind of getting into the weeds and trying to figure it all out. You're visiting colleges, you're trying to figure out need-based aid and merit aid, and your students have to write essays and figure out what they want to be when they grow up. And there's a lot to do. And there's always going to be a lot to do in the late stage, even if you do a fantastic job in the early stage, because, it's kind of just the next step. And I think that's, so when we start talking about early stage, you're not visiting colleges, you're not having your kids write essays and all that kind of stuff. So what can you do? Well,
Mm.
I guess it's starting with the college is going to happen someday mindset and budget, right? So I work with a lot of people in the late stage, right? So most of the people I'm actually coaching and who are my customers are late stage.
Mm.
But I see the damage when they do poor early stage planning. And the damage is, I don't care how much you earn, if you learn how to spend it all, college is going to hurt. Because I've had families, earning $150,000 a year saying, well, wow, that college is kind of expensive. There's no way we can afford that. And then the next family that comes in earns $250,000 and they say the exact same thing. And the reality, a lot of people say, wait a minute, if you earn an extra $100,000 more than that other guy, you should be able to pay for college, no problem. But
Mm-hmm.
again, it's the bigger garage theory. I don't care how big your garage is, it's going to be full because you don't consider throwing things out or doing things differently until it is full. And then once you get there, then it's painful, right? And the guy that has the 1-car garage looks at the neighbor that has a 2-car garage and say, oh, that'd be so fantastic. Of course, that one's full, and he's looking at the guy down the street that has a 3-car garage and so forth and so on. And it's just that challenge of, if you're going to be spending money on college, it's getting to be a bigger line item in a family budget. So again, some families can solve that by saving a couple $100 per kid from the time they're born until you're off to college, per month. So if you had 3 kids and you save $200 each, at least by today's standards, that would work out pretty well. Obviously, 18 years from now, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. I don't think college is going to continue to grow at the paces that it has been growing because it's kind of met its limit. So I don't think college is, it's going to continue to grow with typical inflation. But
Mm-hmm.
the last 20 years, it grew a lot faster than inflation. And that's because, and again, people say, well, why? Well, there's been a lot of mandates on colleges. It's gotten more complex. They now have to have police forces and mental health facilities, and they have to manage all kinds of things, and they have to pay for all that. So generally, parents are demanding more services for their children and better facilities, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, now somebody has to pay for all that. And that's one of the reasons that the price is going up. The states also, reduced how much they're willing to spend towards college. So the prices at the state colleges also went up. So, so the prices are going up. But what's also happened, like through COVID, the prices, the published prices went up. In other words, the average state school is about $27,000. And a few years ago, it was $26,000. But the amount of aid that you get also went up. So your net cost hasn't changed as much. And I think that's where a lot of people go. So the net cost hasn't gone up much in the last 3 or 4, 5 years. And again, that had a lot to do with COVID. COVID was very challenging for schools because when they were going online and stuff, it was hard for them to raise prices. And, so it's a pretty complicated system. But if you've got young kids, the first step is to say, all right, we're probably going to help contribute towards college. And if you're if you're in a career path or something where you're going to be, reasonably well compensated, if you're even like teachers, right? 2 teachers earn a pretty good living by the time they have 20-year-olds at home or 18-year-olds at home. They'll have 20 years of experience probably, or 25 years on the job, and they'll have a lot of raises and so forth. They'll be expected to pay a good chunk of the college. And so you kind of have to bake that into your plans when especially when you're making those big life decisions. And that, the biggest ones would be, how big is the home we're going to live in? And I realize it's always a challenge, and a lot of young people are feeling priced out, and there's all those issues, and it is a hot button. I understand that. But the reality is, if you don't save a couple hundred a month starting when they're young, then you need to save a couple thousand a month when they're old. And then if you can't do that, well, then you're going to spend a couple thousand or whatever. You're going to take loans to fill the gaps. But somehow, if you think college is going to happen, it's going to have to be paid for. And the higher your income, the more likely a bigger piece of that is going to come from you as the parents. And that's just the reality. So I have a lot of families, a lot of young families, when I'm talking with them, they say things like, well, daycare is crazy expensive. I can't pay for or set up savings for college yet. We'll do that when they get older. Well, here's the reality. Kids don't get cheaper when they get older. You switch from daycare to some other thing. And whether it's their sports or their activities or their lessons or their tutoring, there's always a way to spend that savings. And you just need to have the discipline to kind of roll that all in and say, all right, we might have to drive, lesser cars for more years so that we can include college in our plan, or a slightly smaller home, or, deliver pizza Saturday nights. I don't know what the right answer for most families is, but if you don't consciously put it in the budget, it's probably going to get excluded, and then it's going to come back and be a surprise in the future.
Makes sense. So how can a young couple with in the early phases, how can they even approach that conversation? Because it's definitely a conversation that's had, but then it kind of just falls off. And then, like you mentioned, you have a lot of late phase people that you're working with, because I feel like that's when the conversation's real and it has to happen, and there's no choice but to have it because you have to have it. So how can that conversation be approached early on? How can a couple have that conversation?
Yeah, well, I think a good place to start is to just talk about how, especially if if one or both of the couple went to college themselves, is how did they do it, and how do they envision, how does that experience color what they want to do for their own children. I have many parents say things like, well, I worked really, really hard to pay for my own college and put it all together. And then some parents will say, and because of that, I want to make it much easier for my children. Or other parents say, and because of that, well, they can do it too. They can just work hard and pay for college. Now, the challenge there, I think, is for a lot of, depending on when you went to college. When I went to college, tuition was $1,200 for the year at my state school. So, which is just, it's certainly unheard of these days, right? Where it's a different game. So, when my generation, and I'm an old dad compared to perhaps a lot of your listeners, but when I went to college, it was much less expensive, and I could work hard in summers and borrow some money and kind of put it together all by myself. If your parents disqualify you from the Pell Grants and some of that stuff, so if the family income's over, say, 75 to 100,000 in today's dollars, you're not likely to get the Pell Grants and that kind of stuff, which makes a typical state school almost unattainable without parental help. Because if the average cost is $27,000 and a student can borrow about $5,000, and they could earn maybe another $5,000 on summers and weekends, so that's $10,000 of the 25. And where's the rest going to come from? Again, they could work extra hard and make another 5 or 10, but it would be really hard. And they're family, kids that do that. Or if they could live at home, then that might reduce the cost. But again, a lot of the families I'm working with, they want their kid to have that college experience. I'm one of those parents, right? I loved college. It was a great experience for me. And I want my kids to have that. And a lot of the families I'm working with are saying the exact same thing of, we want our kids to have that 4-year on-campus experience, get to grow up, get to, spread their wings, go do some things, learn some things. It was great for me. I want it for my kids. And that's one of the reasons why, another reason why college is so expensive. There's enough parents out there that says, well, whatever it takes, I'm going to make it happen. And there's enough parents that are willing to spend some of their money to help kids along. And because of that system, whether it's fair or not, right? I mean, parents could argue, well, they're 18, they're adults, they're on their own. What does it have anything to do with me? They can go do it on their own. And it's like, well, right or wrong, that's just the way the system has been set up, is that a typical young, right out of high school is going to have to report mom and dad. Once they turn 24, they're independent and mom and dad are no longer involved. But for most kids, that would be a pretty long delay from high school till becoming independent and going off to college.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we want to do it, and I feel like it's harder for kids now, especially because a lot of jobs don't hire that high school age. There's very few jobs available for them to actually go and earn that money outside of like maybe lawn mowing or yard work or babysitting, but that only pays so much to earn over a summer. It's very limited time. There's not a lot of time to earn, $15,000 to cover that gap, So it's hard.
Yes.
It's definitely harder today than when I went to school. I was able to kind of offset some of that. I went to smaller schools, and so the tuition wasn't crazy, and it was subsidized, and there was a lot more help back when I went to college. I went to college about 10 years ago, so it was a lot different than it is now today, and it's going to be a lot different in 10, 12 years when my kids are looking at going to college, if that is their choice, and if that's the path they decide to take. My older daughter, she wants to be a vet, and I'm like, whew, that's going to be a lot of money.
Yeah.
But, if that's her dream, that's what she wants to involve. And I love what you said, like, if you don't start now with a couple hundred to where it's attainable and something that you could put into the budget, then it does become a couple thousand in a few short years, to where that couple thousand might not be there, depending on circumstances and whatnot. But for me personally, kind of looking at it, so situation here, my kids and their mother were divorced. I have a bachelor's degree. My ex-wife does not have a college degree, and so college really is really important to me. I feel like for her, it's going to be do your own thing, whatever path you want to take, whatever. So in that situation, for paying for college, we're divorced. One has a college education, one doesn't. How can that conversation happen? How do you figure out who is going to pay for the finances and who's going to support the kids in these different ways?
Yeah. I mean, I just was recently a guest on a podcast where this was the entire topic of divorce and college and how that all comes together, because there's a number of different important things to realize. One is, for example, financial aid is different because of who's going to be on the financial aid forms. Most of the time in a divorce situation, it's going to be one parent on the FAFSA. But if a lot of colleges also do what's called a CSS profile, and those financial forms often will ask for both parents. So some colleges will look at one parent, some colleges will look at both. So depending on your situation, you may be better off at one type of college or the other. So it just depends. And so there's the added complexity around, most of the time in a divorce situation, college was often ignored as part of the process. So again, as an example, I've had many parents in the late stages where, and who's going to pay for this? One spouse says, well, mom or dad earned a lot of money, or can earn a lot of money, or is earning a lot of money, they should pay. And a lot of times that person says, well, wait a minute, I've been paying large amounts of child support for years and years and years. Where did all that money go? Why wasn't some of that saved for college? And there's no right or wrong here. That, again, it's just the reality of, is often when families divorce, there's just less money to go around, because now there's two households to support where it used to be one. And and then you can get into the complexities of a blended family of, well, my family consists of parents we've got some kids between us and some kids from previous marriages, kind of this blended mix in our household.
Mm-hmm.
And there's rules for all that as far as how financial aid works and all that kind of stuff. And you just need to figure it out and understand it. And then there's also opportunities perhaps to plan. So that's the other side of divorce. Is I've had many parents that are maybe contemplating divorce or have divorced or wherever they are in the process, but they've come as a couple still, and they say, well, college is important to both of us and we want to help our kids make it happen. We happen to be divorced, but we don't want that to stop us. Are there things that we can do? And when parents cooperate, then there's some opportunities to kind of make lemonade out of those lemons, right? Where yes, divorce is almost never a great situation, but at least you get a little more aid because of it, or at least you can take advantage of some of the loopholes that families that are still together can't. Now, will that benefit? And then occasionally I've had married people kind of joke and they say, well, if that's the way it works, we should just get divorced. And it's like, well, it's not gonna be a net positive to get divorced. But like I said, the divorce is going to happen anyway. You may as well take advantage of it. But it's not a way to work the system for most families. But like I said, again, there's lots of things that make college more complicated. Divorce is one, and divorce and blended families. But if you have a student athlete who might play in college, there's an extra layer of complexity for that. Families that own businesses, you have some additional opportunities, but additional challenges there. If you have a high achieving student, if you have the kid that could go to Harvard or Yale, or as an Olympic ice skater, or all the very high achieving type of kids.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, and again, there's always that one better, but there's lots of kids that are really strong candidates that could be, get a really strong scholarship at some schools and maybe just barely get accepted at others. So I use the example, a kid that can get accepted to Notre Dame, but just barely, just kind of squeak in. Well, they might be good scholarship material at Marquette or Loyola, or, pick a school. And they might be a rock star at some small college that most people have never heard of, and they might get a full ride at that little school that nobody's heard of. Now, the challenge is a lot of parents and students want to go to the name brand schools where they have to pay, right? So Notre Dame's going to charge you full price or nearly full price, so it could be $60,000, $70,000 potentially. You might get $25,000 off a $60,000 school in some cases where you get a decent scholarship. So now it's $35,000. Your local state school might be $25,000 or $30,000. And this little private school that really wants you and is going to give you the presidential scholarship, which makes your tuition to zero and all you pay is room and board, that school might only cost you $14,000. But are you willing to go to a school that nobody's ever heard of just because the cost is low? And I guess for some families, the answer is absolutely, because we don't have it. We don't have a bunch of savings and we don't have a bunch of ways to pay for it. So that looks like a great option. Other families that say, well, I don't want to be painted in a corner like that. I would rather set up some savings plans or do some college planning so that when we get there, we have a choice because we have the funds if we want to.
True. And I think that's really important because, every kid's going to be different for what they want as well. Different kids are going to have different wants and different needs. And maybe just using my daughter as an example, she's 6, she's really young, but using my daughter's example, she really wants to be a vet. If that continues to be her dream, maybe the pre-vet program over here at this really small school is really good, and they're offering her, that scholarship because she did really well in school, versus the big name school with a lesser program but a bigger name, so maybe there's more name recognition coming from that pre-program versus those conversations. So I guess the question with that is, how can parents have those conversations with their kids? Are those real honest conversations of saying, hey, look, how can a parent help their kids weigh the pros and cons? And the situation you said versus Notre Dame, you're getting nothing. You barely got in. Middle of the pack, Loyola, you're getting a half ride, or no-name school no one's ever heard of in South Dakota, Mississippi, whatever, is offering you a full ride with a program that's just as good. Like, how can parents have those tough but honest conversations with their kids to kind of help them and also let them know kind of where they're at? Like, how involved should the kid know, like, where the finances are at to help them weigh that decision without making it
Right.
feel guilty?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a that's a tall order to not feel guilty, because I think parents feel guilty at the drop of a hat in general when it comes to college.
100%.
Um, I mean, that's just kind of part of the process of, there's nothing too good for my kids
Mm-hmm.
is a common refrain, right? That you hear. And then when you get to college and the price tags are so huge, all of a sudden you really can't live by that rule anymore, because you just, at least you shouldn't, in my opinion, because it breaks the bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you need to be open and honest. And I think you need to start early relatively to the way we did it when we were young, right? I didn't really think much about college till halfway through the junior year into the senior year. I encourage families to start at least a year earlier. Like, and again, I have kids in high school, kids in college now. We do college visits sophomore year. Now, they're not the, hey, let's go look at this school and decide if you're going to go there or not. It's more of a, hey, let's go explore some colleges because it's coming. And someday you're going to have to make a decision about if you want a big school or a small school. And to be fair, in my opinion, they probably should see a big school and a small school before they decide, because a typical 17-year-old has no idea what a big school and a small school even look like. So, getting out there a little bit early and just doing some preliminary visits that are no pressure, just local schools. You don't have to travel across the country. You just go to the nearest big school and the nearest small school, with the caveat with the kids and saying, I know you don't want to go here, but we just want to go check it out and learn about how college works and get it. You can see a classroom, you can see a dorm, you can see what a campus looks like. You can see the kids running around on the quad having a good time or not, or, whatever there is to see. You can see the big football stadium, whatever it might be that, you might be interested in. Because then later in the process, now it's like, well, you got to pick a school. Well, I like this one better than that one. Well, why? Well, the tour guide was cute. Well, wait a minute. Maybe the tour guide's going to graduate by the time I get there. Maybe that's not a reason to pick the school. Maybe I
Yeah.
need to focus on, I want to be a biologist and it's got a good biology program. And I visited the biology labs and I really liked them. And the professor was passionate about a topic that I'm passionate about. That's why I want to go there. Okay. Or again, I want to be in the football stadium with 50,000 of my favorite friends cheering on our team. Okay, great. But it's that process that takes time. And as busy parents, dedicating that time is hard. So, again, the short answer, just do it and do it early so that you can spread it out, because it's a process. It's not something you do on it's not like, okay, well, this Sunday afternoon, we're going to work really hard and we're going to put our college plan together. It's like, no, it's going to be many Sunday afternoons, and it's not just going to fall together. It's going to be, oh, here's some ideas. Let's go do some of these things. Based on what we've learned, let's go do different things. Based on what we've learned, let's do more of the same things. Based on what we've learned, we need to focus here or focus there. But a lot of times there's just these strange, these things that are like a disconnect, right? Where the colleges my student really likes require test scores that are stronger than my student has. Okay, well, you're going to change the schools or the test scores. So that's the reality. And
Yeah.
you can do both, or neither, but you just need to, but once you learn that, it's like, okay, well, this is a problem that's on it, that is going to, turn out poorly if we just keep going.
Yeah.
So, and then you get into the finances, right? And the finances is another big can of worms, and this is where I help a lot of families. But if you do this, you'll get a little more aid. If you do that, you save on taxes. If you do this, this is going to be counted against you for financial aid. But if you do that, that's not counted against you for financial aid. But then you have kind of competing things. This is good if you go to a state school, but this is good if you go to a private school. Well, we don't know which one we're going to go to yet. So how do we decide which one to do? And, so in getting into the nitty gritty tactics, right? There's the overarching strategy of How much can the family afford? How much can the family willing to spend? How much is going to be on the kids versus on the parents? How are we going to be fair among the kids? Do they each get the same amount of money? Just kind of big picture stuff, all the way down into the weeds of, well, if we have to fill out this form and there's a blank here that says, what did you contribute to your pension plan? How do we figure out what the answer to that is? Who's in charge of filling out this long form with all these interesting financial questions that are a little bit challenging? And if I put the wrong answer in there, what's the ramifications? And actually, now that I know I'm going to be reporting these numbers, should I do something different so that the numbers are better? Again, they look at how much money you have in your savings accounts. So does that mean we should not have any savings? Well, that's a challenging question to answer until you've got the whole plan figured out.
Yeah.
But sometimes, yes, you want to do things differently because it'll help you get more aid.
100%. And I love what you said about looking without pressure. I remember when I want to say I was maybe 12 or 13, my aunt took my cousins and my oldest cousin was 16, 17, so she was looking at colleges and she was getting an idea of kind of what she wants. But we went on this really long summer road trip from Washington all the way to the East Coast. And we stopped all along the way. There was a lot of fun stuff that was built in, like the Mall of America, different stops, like water parks, things like that. Really cool stuff, visiting family in North Dakota and stuff. And then also mixed in with that was seeing different colleges that she may or may not have wanted to attend. She had a really great resume, music, great bass player, Seattle orchestra player, as a teenager, just really great accolades that were already kind of lining her up for a lot of scholarships and whatnot. But she was trying to find a really good music program that she liked and worked. And so we looked at colleges in the Midwest. We looked at them in North Dakota. And then, of course, me and my cousin were just there. We're 12, 13. We didn't think anything of it. But now that you're mentioning that, I remember going to all those different colleges on the East Coast, all along New York and Boston College and some of these smaller schools North Dakota, things like that, a big mix. We went to schools that I remember her saying I will not go here. I will not live in this state. I will not go to this school. I don't know why we're even going on this visit. And my aunts just remember her saying we're just going on it to go on it. Just so you have an idea. I know you're not going to go here, but I just want you to see it just so you can get an idea so that you're 100% sure. And, fast forward to when I was looking at schools, I remember I wanted to either go to UC Santa Cruz because I love Santa Cruz. My grandma lived in Santa Cruz. I spent a lot of time down there with her, and it was a lot of fun. I visited that campus, loved it. Love UC Santa Cruz. I love UC Berkeley because I was an Oakland kid, and loved going to Berkeley football games, loved the life at Berkeley. It was a lot of fun. UW is another one I went to and visited, massive UW, super fun, loved it. Roots are in Seattle. So these different places I loved, but then what had happened for me personally was I got denied for all these schools I really wanted to go to. My top 15 schools, I got denied for all of them. So then I was in a boat where I only had small schools to pick from. I didn't get into BYU. I got into BYU Idaho. I was LDS at the time. I got into Menlo Business College. I never visited a small campus, though. So I had no clue, where this place was. I'd never been to Menlo. I'd never been to Menlo Park and didn't know there was even a college there. But that college I had a full ride to. They were offering me, that presidential scholarship just based on grade and things like that. University of Utah was offering me a partial ride for the pre-med program. I knew they had a great med school at University of Utah. And then BYU Idaho was the one that was small that I knew people were going to. I had friends going there. Girl I was dating at the time, she was going there. So it was okay, I have a little bit of scholarship there. I'm getting grants, so it's affordable. Screw it, let's go to Idaho. It's kind of my only option. I had sports options that fell off because of injury. So that was another kind of a dagger in the soul there that kind of almost ruined college for me, top of the denials and whatnot. But I really wish I would have looked at really small schools that no one heard of, because maybe Menlo could have been a really good fit. I wish I would have known more about what a small campus looked like or felt like for a visit or anything like that, or being in Idaho, what that was like, the climates, things like that. Because I'm going from warm, sunny Bay Area, California to southeast Idaho to where it's negative 30 degrees, negative 45 with wind chill in the winter when I'm going to be there. Never experienced that. We went to Tahoe in the winter time where it was very mild and tame. We got to
Mm-hmm.
choose when we went to snow. We went to the snow. The snow didn't come to us, kind
Right.
of thing. So I wish I would have known these like things going in. Some of those things that in hindsight, it all worked out. I'm happy. I left school, went back to school, finished online, got my degree years later. But it all worked out. But I just really wouldn't have known these things going in. Definitely something that is going to be
Right.
big for me with my kids. Like, okay, let's go look at a trade school. Let's go look at a 4-year university. Let's go look at some small schools, big, medium, small. Let's look in. If we're going to travel here, let's go and look at a college while we're here for this vacation, just because we can, kind of thing. Walk on campus and get an idea, pick up the vibes, things like that. Because you never know when the click is gonna hit, and it's
Right.
really cool.
Exactly.
So
Right. And if you talk to, 5 or 10 or 20 people, you'll discover that everybody has their own path and their own story, and they can be very different. And I think that's where, again, parents need to realize that your children, first of all, that they may do it differently just among your children, right? My kids are very different. I've got one that's going to the local private school and one that's 3 states away, and one in high school that's very undecided at this point. And, and it was a different path for each of them, and still is, right? I'm still working with my youngest, of course. And then there's the whole idea of college for everyone is, in my opinion, it's a myth. It's bad advice. I mean, lots and lots of kids are banging their head against the college wall and they're not graduating and they're just racking up debt and they don't know why they're doing it, other than all they've ever heard is I have to go to college.
that was
But
me. That
it
was
doesn't
me.
really fit into their life at this point, right? So I think it's more important to say education for everyone. It's going to be a tough life if you don't have an education, but getting an education doesn't automatically equate to college. College is one option, but there's also internships and certificate programs. And, and so for some kids, the right answer is that school of hard knocks. They just need to get out in the world and see how it really works. My oldest are boys and they're both working this summer, and they're both, put a couple of months in now, and they're both ready to go back to college because they realize that reporting to work at 7 a.m. and putting in a 8 or 9 or 10-hour day every day, all weekdays, they're realizing why they want an education because they're
Yeah.
working hard, and
Hmm.
they get home dirty and tired and they have to take a shower, and they very quickly say, I don't think I'd want to be doing this for the rest of my days.
Yeah. It's that lived
Um,
experience.
so yes, exactly.
It's that living it. And I feel like a lot of kids don't understand that, and unfortunately, they don't get the opportunities. I was very lucky. I got to be a lifeguard. I got to work. I got to work at a pool. So it was a really fun job, but I got to work. I got to experience that. And then I had a really good connection from my high school that set me up at in like a kitchen, working in like prep and stuff. So I got to do that. So I got to do a couple different jobs, do some different things while I was in high school. That gave me experience. Like, yeah, I don't really want to work in food. I ended up being a GM out of college of a fast food place, because I had that food experience. It was my background in aquatics and parks and things like that. I got to learn those things, and I feel like a lot of kids today they don't get to do those things because they're very limited on what they can do because places just don't hire minors anymore, and they kind of tabooed away from that. A lot of that's because of laws and stuff that are in place because they can't do a lot of things. They can't sell certain products and items, so they just kind of shy away from hiring that demographic, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is as a business. But um, yeah, definitely my piece of advice to other parents and dads and stuff, like let your kids explore, let them learn, take them experiences, try new things, do different things, play pretend, let them find what's going to click for them because it's going to be different from you. That's
Right.
100% for sure. So, and just
Yeah.
support them
And
if
I
their
think
dream
there's,
is.
the other side of it sometimes is you might, there's a lot of shy kids out there and so forth where you might have to push them a little bit, whereas they, sometimes, my kids are different that way. I've got, some of my oldest is very much likes to try new things and get involved in stuff. And my second and third are homebodies more and not as willing to get out there and try stuff, to the point where I got to push them a little bit and say, all right, well, just try it. You might like it. And often that's true, right? When they go finally try it, they say, oh, this is fun. I'm glad I tried it.
Yeah.
And my son has come home eating all kinds of foods. Exactly. My son's come home from college eating all kinds of stuff that he was adamant that he didn't like before he left for college. So, it is a time for change, and you have to realize that as well, that, sometimes you send them off kids and they come home adults. Yeah. And there's a little bit of a change there as well.
Yeah, but those are the changes that just make your heart happy as a parent. When they try new things and they experience something and they end up loving it or liking it, and it changes their world or gives them a new hobby, it brings them joy. Those are just the moments where it's like, well, I wish you would have listened to me and just done it the first time, but I'm glad you still got to experience it and you have something new that you love and enjoy and you care about that makes you happy. Like, ultimately, that's what matters most in the end. So, last question for you here, kind of just in tradition of the Young Dad podcast. What's your one piece of kind of just dad advice for like a dad who might be struggling, trying to figure all this out, or kind of just down in the dumps about it, feels a little hopeless or lost, like on this path of specifically like working toward college? Like, what are you telling that dad specifically? What's your piece of dad advice there? Like your one piece of dad advice?
Yeah. I mean, it can be overwhelming and stressful. And, I tell people you're going to pay for college with money for sure, but you're also going to pay for college with time and stress. And for some families, money's the easier route, as we can just hire someone to do it, right? Just like our fixing your car, right? We used to change our own brakes and change our own oil and do stuff on the car. It's getting hard. It's hard to do it now because of the way the cars are built. And most of us choose to just not even deal with it. We're just going to pay for it. And the same can be said around planning for college, right? You can hire someone that can help your student figure out what they want to be when they grow up. You can help someone with essays. You can hire someone to help with essays, and again, sometimes you can't afford to pay, but my son got essay help from a family friend. He wasn't going to get essay help from me because I'm not capable of doing essay help. I'm more of a numbers guy. My wife theoretically could have helped him, but again, that's a dynamic that's challenging in a lot of families, right? So it was easier to outsource that to a family friend who was a good writer and kind of knew a little bit of the drill, and that worked out well in that situation. So there's lots of ways to solve this. I offer lots of free resources and online courses and all kinds of things. So I guess, and don't give up, because if you look at a typical college campus, it's full of kids. So lots of people figure it out. It can be done. It's just a matter of, doing the best you can and allowing yourself enough time and to get it to work through the whole process.
100%. I love that. So just last few minutes here, tell us where, if I was just looking out there on the internet, and where would I find some of these resources you mentioned, Brad?
Right. Yeah. So all my stuff is at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. So that's, my podcast is there, and my podcast is also available wherever you got this podcast, I'm sure. But that's, everything is there. So we've got some, like I said, free resources and some charts, and there's a EFC calculator there that helps you, or excuse me, SAI calculator now. That has changed, but there's calculators to help you figure out financial aid. There's lists of schools and charts and databases and all kinds of good stuff that, again, will get you started, and articles. And then if you're there, you want to sign up for my newsletter, and then we kind of walk you through the process. And, you get an email between a week and 10 days or whatever it might be, depending on what's going on, but kind of reminding you to get back to it. And here's an idea about this, or here's an idea about that. I think that's helpful for a lot of families where, again, because it's always on the to-do list, but sometimes it never makes it to the top, and it needs to occasionally get to the top so you can do some things, get the ball rolling. And then if it gets ignored for a while, that works out a lot better than just ignoring it and until the end and then trying to scramble and get it all done.
100%. I love that. And the website is linked in the show notes for the listener. So Anything else? Anything else that the listeners should know about you? Know where to find you? Anything else that you want to promote or put in here at the end?
Yeah, no, like I said, I think everything is there. And again, if you think you want to chat with me, you can reach out directly through the website there. There's a phone number. There's you can schedule online meetings and that type of thing, if whatever works for you. But, again, there's lots of reasons that it gets more complicated for some families, and it may make sense, like I said, to just outsource it or have someone help you figure out where you stand, especially for things like inheritance and divorce and business ownership and other things that just make it more complicated. And, for a lot of families, especially, your time is better spent doing other parts of the process or better spent solving other, family problems, whatever that might be.
True. I love that. Well, Brad, thank you so much. Again, all of your website, your podcast, Facebook page, they're all linked in the show notes for the listener to find. So please use those. The website's really cool. I'm close. I'm in the early phases, but I looked through the website. I spent a lot of time because there's a lot of different places. There's a lot of information there. It's really cool. Definitely check out Brad's podcast, Taming the High Cost of College. It's really cool. It's really different. If you're in the early phases, I think everyone should absolutely listen to it, no matter what phase or stage you're in of life, because it's just great information. A lot of fun. Brad, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Very grateful. Much appreciative of your time. So,
yeah. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Audience, go ahead and clap us out, guys.